welcome to the deep dive. You're here because, well, you want to really get a handle on things, right?
Yeah.
Dig into complex ideas, but without feeling like you're just drowning in information.
Yeah, we get it. That's what we aim for, too.
So today, we're tackling something that I think affects pretty much everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Navigating success and failure. And, maybe more importantly, how we ourselves can sometimes be our own biggest roadblock.
That's spot on. We're going to explore how success, once you actually get it, can be surprisingly fragile.
Upper down, yeah.
And we'll look at how ego, that sort of inner voice, can get louder after a win and maybe, just maybe, set you up for a fall.
Mm-hmm.
We've got some really thought-provoking stuff here, looking at success itself, the role ego plays, the absolute need to keep learning.
Always learning.
Always. And also the danger of, creating these neat little stories about how we succeeded, which might not be entirely true or helpful.
Okay, so the mission for this deep dive is to really pull apart those common traps, the ones that seem to pop up when we hit a certain level.
Right.
And more than just pointing out the problems, we want to find some actual strategies to, sidestep them. We'll look at some cautionary tales, sure, but also examples of people, organizations that manage to keep it going.
Sustained success. That's the goal.
Exactly. Okay, let's jump in. That feeling of success, why can it sometimes feel so, slippery?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? The environment at the top often seems way more treacherous than the climb itself.
Huh, like climbing a mountain.
Kind of, yeah. Like you're on this narrow peak, right? Less room to move, and even a tiny slip can have huge consequences.
Okay, I get that.
And that's where ego can become a real problem. It can, speed up a decline that might otherwise be slow or even cause a sudden crash.
And you're saying these are often avoidable?
Often, yeah. If we can just spot the warning signs, it's often self-inflicted, driven by that ego.
We saw something interesting from Adam Smith talking about two kinds of ambition, proud versus humble.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. It really frames the tension we're talking about, that internal pull between wanting the spotlight, the recognition, and cultivating those quieter qualities, the modesty. That might actually be what keeps you stable long term.
It feels really relevant, even now.
Absolutely. And it plays out everywhere. A really powerful, though maybe cautionary example of that unchecked ambition is Howard Hughes.
Oh, right. Howard Hughes inherited a fortune basically overnight, didn't he? Like 18?
Just 18, yeah. And he was smart, too. Took over his father's company, really ran with it initially. You'd think that kind of start guarantees success,
But
right?
really would. A massive head start.
And he was brilliant in certain areas,
Yeah.
genuinely innovative in aviation, made some classic films.
There's always a but.
But, yeah, if you look past the sort of Hollywood myth, the image he projected, the sources we looked at suggest this pattern of ego-driven choices. Decisions that ultimately wasted incredible potential and, well, led to a pretty sad and isolated end.
It feels like textbook self-sabotage,
Mm-hmm.
looking back. He basically abandoned the tool company, the one that gave him his wealth.
Walked away from it, yeah. Then lost fortunes in the stock market crash. Not just once.
Twice. And wasn't Hell's Angels a financial disaster?
Oh, huge. Nearly bankrupted him. And then there's the Spruce Goose. Millions spent on this plane that flew for, less than half a minute?
20 seconds, yeah.
Incredible. And what's really striking, thinking about how this applies more broadly, is how many of these were his own doing.
Right, self-inflicted.
Totally. Despite having this solid foundation from his dad's company, he kept making these choices fueled by ego, his growing paranoia, and honestly, just bad management.
RKO Pictures is another example, right?
Yeah.
Bought it, poured money in, drove it into the ground.
Exactly. Even his wartime contracts, where his technical skills should have shown, often plagued by delays, didn't deliver.
It wasn't just the business stuff, was it? There were accusations, tax fraud, plane crashes.
Multiple crashes, yeah. Millions spent on increasingly weird projects. This pattern of paranoia, bullying.
It paints a picture of someone just getting lost inside their own head, consumed by ego.
Completely. And there's that almost unbelievable image later in his life. Sitting naked, apparently, dictating these incredibly detailed memos, some brilliant, some completely off the wall.
Wow.
It's like his own mind became the enemy, that internal conflict just laid bare.
Joan Didion had that quote, didn't she? About how he made a hero out of him.
Yeah, that's just sharp observation. Why are we sometimes drawn to those kinds of flawed success stories? What does that say about us?
That's a deep question. Maybe we focus on the glamour, the eccentricity, and just ignore the dysfunction,
Yeah.
waste.
Could be. He ended up, as one source said, in a self-made asylum. It's just a really stark warning.
It really is.
And it reminds me of Aristotle, saying it's hard to handle good fortune well without virtue and training.
Hughes seemed to lack that internal anchor.
Definitely. And the sources suggest that ego, maybe you keep it down while you're climbing, but once you reach the top, it surges. And ironically, it weakens the very things that got you there.
Harold Jean, the ITT guy, he had a really strong take on this. Said ego is a bigger threat to business than alcoholism.
That's a powerful claim, isn't it?
It really is.
And he linked it to insecurity, fear of being wrong, not wanting honest feedback. Ego blinds you. It creates this bubble where you can't see reality clearly.
Dangerous for you, dangerous for everyone around you.
Exactly. It's that feeling of, I'm special. The rules, they don't apply to me.
So tempting after a win, though. Have you ever felt that pull?
Oh, I think it's a very human thing to feel. But it's the opposite of what Viktor Frankl talked about, right? Being pulled by values, not just pushed by drives.
Right. Values give you that lasting foundation.
That's what the sources suggest, for success that actually lasts. So practically speaking, what are the anchors? What keeps the ego in check?
The sources point to things like sobriety, keeping a clear head, open-mindedness, good old organization,
Yeah.
and having a clear purpose, something bigger than just yourself.
Those seem like solid guardrails. They force self-awareness, connect you to something beyond just your own wins.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Consider someone totally different. Genghis Khan.
Right. The popular image is just brutal conquest, destructive force.
Yeah, that's the stereotype. But the sources we looked at paint a different picture, suggesting he was actually a perpetual student.
Exactly. That his incredible success building this massive empire wasn't just brute force. It was rooted in his ability to constantly learn.
Learned from who?
From everyone, especially the cultures he conquered. He was incredibly pragmatic. He'd observe, see what worked best strategies, technologies, and just adopt them, integrate them.
Like the decimal system for organizing his army. That came from Turkic tribes, right?
Yep. Fundamentally changed his military structure. Or siege warfare. He learned that from the Tanguts. Even brought in Chinese engineers to teach his guys.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And valuing intellectual, skilled people from all over doesn't fit the barbarian mold at all.
Not even close. He understood that every new success, every expansion brought new challenges, and facing those challenges required him to keep learning, to stay in that student mindset.
So it's not just for beginners.
Absolutely not. The sources really stress this applies everywhere. Junior person gets promoted to manager. New challenges, gotta learn. Startup founder needs to scale, same thing. Continuous learning is key.
It makes me think of that physicist, John Wheeler. As our island of knowledge grows, so does the shore of our ignorance.
Perfect quote for this. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. It really does take humility to embrace that.
Wynton Marsalis had a great take on this too, didn't he? About humility.
Yeah, he said humility engenders learning because it beats back the arrogance that puts blinders on. It keeps you open to truth, open to getting better.
So being a student isn't just phase one, it's forever.
It has to be a lifelong thing. Learning from wins, sure, but also from failures. Even learning from enemies or competitors.
The danger's getting comfortable then, settling in.
That's the killer, the comfort zone, where you're never challenged, never feel out of your depth. You stop learning, and eventually your weaknesses get exposed.
Frank Shamrock's mantra, always stay a student. Simple, but powerful.
Captures it perfectly. Keep that humility, that curiosity alive.
And there were practical tips too, right? How to actually do this.
Yeah, like actively reading stuff outside your field. Putting yourself in rooms where you know you'll be the least knowledgeable person.
Ooh, that takes guts.
It does. And consciously challenging your own assumptions. It's about seeking out that discomfort, that learning edge.
It's the difference between the defensive amateur pretending they know it all.
Right, versus the pro who actually enjoys learning, enjoys being challenged.
And this applies to businesses too. Why established companies get disrupted.
Often, yeah. They lose that student mentality. They stop learning about their market, about new tech, about what customers really want now. They get complacent.
Peter Drucker made a good point too. It's not just wanting to learn, but understanding how you learn best.
Exactly. And then building processes, systems to make sure that learning actually happens. Otherwise, it's just a nice idea.
Okay, so we've got ego pitfalls, the need to stay a student. Now let's talk about these self-created narratives. Why are they risky, especially after you've achieved something?
The Bill Walsh story with the 49ers is such a great illustration here.
Right, the turnaround. Worst team to Super Bowl champs in, what, 3 years?
Just 3 years, an absolutely incredible feat. And you can imagine the pressure, the temptation for him to say, yep, this was my grand plan all along.
The genius coach narrative, he saw it all from day one, makes for a better story.
Much better story. Tidy, impressive. But Walsh just refused to play that game.
He said no when asked if he had a timetable for the Super Bowl.
Consistently said no, because realistically, taking over that team, setting that kind of immediate goal was just disconnected from reality. His focus wasn't the Super Bowl trophy, not initially.
It was the standard of performance.
Exactly. Those incredibly detailed, almost tiny things about how everything should be done. Practice habits, meeting protocols, everything.
Like players not sitting down on the practice field, coaches having a dress code. That level of detail.
That granular level. It wasn't micromanaging just because. It was about building this culture of excellence everywhere.
Yeah.
His whole thing was, if we nailed these fundamentals consistently,
The score takes care of itself.
that was the belief. He trusted the process. And he was even humble enough to say the speed of their first win involved a fortuitous break, a bit of luck.
Didn't just chalk it up to his master plan. He even fired a coach for complaining about the focus on details, right?
Yeah, reportedly. Shows how committed he was to that process over some grand, possibly false narrative.
Because we do want to believe successful people had it all figured out, don't we? It feeds our own hopes. Maybe lets us take too much credit when things go right for us.
But building that story after the fact can be really dangerous. Tobias Wolff, the writer, he talked about how these stories get cobbled together later, and they can actually block us from seeing other possibilities, from learning from the actual messy, unpredictable way things really happened. Ever looked back on something you did well and realized the story you told yourself wasn't quite accurate?
Oh, absolutely. You smooth out the bumps, make it seem more inevitable, more heroic. And didn't the 49ers themselves kind of fall into that trap after that first Super Bowl?
They did. Started believing their own press, thinking they were just inherently better. And guess what? Their performance dipped.
Predictable, almost.
Almost. It was only when they consciously got back to basics, back to executing that standard of performance day in, day out, that they achieved that sustained long-term dominance.
So the lesson is, once you're at the top, the need to be honest, to listen, to improve. It gets more important, not less.
Way more critical. The stakes are higher. Ego becomes even more destructive then.
Bernard Baruch had that quote about market timing, right? Be skeptical of anyone who says they always buy low, sell high.
Because it just doesn't happen consistently. It's a self-serving story. And Jeff Bezos said something similar about Amazon, no aha moment.
Right, despite how the media might frame it. Building something big is usually messy.
Messy, iterative, surprising, which is why Paul Graham tells startups, start small, keep your identity small.
Focus on the work, not the grand vision narrative.
Exactly. It's the opposite of someone like Napoleon, believing in his destiny, right? That belief led him to overreach, to disaster. Seneca called that great destiny a form of great slavery. You become a slave to the story.
And the advice is also, don't get too attached to labels like genius or fancy job titles.
Yeah, they can distract you from the actual work, the principles that got you there in the first place. There was even a suggestion that maybe some of Google's recent stumbles come from getting too far from their roots, focusing too much on the grand vision instead of the messy work of innovation.
So, bottom line, keep your head down, focus on execution, on excellence now, not on polishing the story of past or future glory.
That sustained focus on the process, on the work itself, seems to be the most reliable way to keep success going.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, the core message feels really clear. Real, lasting success isn't just about talent or getting lucky breaks.
No, it's more demanding than that.
It takes this constant conscious effort, doesn't it? Battling your own ego, committing to always learning, staying humble, and really resisting that urge to write these neat self-congratulatory stories about how great you are.
Exactly. Which brings us to the final thought for everyone listening. Thinking about Hughes's downfall, Khan's constant learning, Walsh's focus on process. What tendencies in yourself might you need to watch out for? As you pursue your own goals, are you truly staying a student? Are you seeking out honest feedback? Or are you maybe, just maybe, starting to believe your own hype a little too much, starting to write that success narrative before the story's really finished?
That's definitely something to chew on. Really valuable food for thought. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Hope it was useful.
We really encourage you to keep mulling over these ideas and see how they might apply in your own world, your own work.